today, so hopefully it.
Yeah, this is how we do the pod. So
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It looks like it's recording. First of all, thanks for agreeing to do this, because I mean I've got like 15 subscribers, so it's very generous of you to.
no, my pleasure, man. Consider it like a thanks as well for all of your support thus far. It's been very appreciated. So it's my pleasure.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah, like I said, I love your stuff. I just think it's. I think I said in one of my reviews, there's Penguin or HarperCollins wouldn't have the balls to go near it. So I think that it's got a very special place in my heart, I think. So just this first question, it's a bit of a full-on one to begin with, but I thought it would be a good place to start. Why is it that you think people have such a drive to create? Like, because I think you and I would probably both agree that existence is meaningless to a certain extent. So why do you think it is that people are so driven to examine existence through art, even if it is meaningless? And do you think that makes art meaningless?
Or is art the only meaning? Is kind of the question I always come to, I suppose. It's kind of one or the other, the yin and the yang of it all. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, it probably is meaningless, but as life is ephemeral and ever changing, I kind of figure that, well, that by deduction, then all meaning is ephemeral. So it can only really mean something in this lifetime, in this existence, between you and I in this moment in time. So that gives me some solace, I suppose. But in terms of like creation, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether it's something to do with our hubris as a species, that we always think it's like, oh, we must be here for a reason and all this kind of thing. Or this just kind of incessant need. We kind of mythologize by design, almost as if it's innate within us to do so. Like we have to figure out, but it's also like we don't have to do it, but we do in order to kind of make sense of the world. So it kind of our vulnerability, I think, also propels us to do it, but also that need to kind of figure out what the fuck's going on. So I think art in that sense can, I don't know, it's kind of about tackling nature, I suppose, and trying to force nature into something concrete, something that you can comprehend to a certain level, but also in the abstract as well. That's why art can take on so many shapes and forms, almost as much as nature. I think it's almost about trying to capture nature and force it into something that is sustainable, at least for the foreseeable future. But again, I mean, yeah, nothing lasts. I think people have an illusion nowadays as well, to kind of sidetrack. But with the internet, I think it gives you delusions of immortality for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I think it's because everyone thinks it's going to just last, in some sort of digital format forever, which obviously might technically feel like it's true, but I don't see how it ever could be, if I'm honest, because it's, given enough time, enough global natural disasters, and then everything's going to be gone again. So it's like, but why we do it? I don't know. It's something to do with like the traumatic element of existing, coupled with the fact that we're all going to die. I think that's what it's all about. I think that's why most stories come down to sex and death, because they're kind of
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I discovered from writing as well. Like I didn't really realize that before I started delving into the horrible world of literature, but that's kind of where I ended up. I was like, oh shit, this is all just about sex and death. Okay.
Well, that's
Right.
what I found with my writing for sure. When I was
Yeah.
like, why am I only writing about sex and death and violence? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
they're the only things that are interesting to me, or that they're the real like fundamentals, I guess, of life.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I often want to write different stuff as well, but it always ends up like, it's just some debauched kind of almost like a traumatic sex scene will always kind of find its way into the story, and it's like,
Same.
yeah. No, maybe it's my like subconscious desires at times, but I don't think it is. I think it's just, I mean, that's what everything ends up being. I mean, Oscar Wilde, was it? Everything in the world is about sex except for sex. Sex is
Yes.
about power, and yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, I also think that every story kind of does do this, but it can be just disguised in different ways as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of. I mean, that's a question that could probably last a whole series of any podcast.
Yeah.
I think that's what it kind of boils down to. I think there's an element of like narcissism to writing as well. I don't think can be completely ignored. I do think there is an element of that. But then it's solipsistic by design, isn't it? It's like you at a desk or whatever writing your thoughts. So it's all very in your own head. But also as you put it out to the world, then it becomes its own entity. It's like I often find it quite amusing as well when someone gets really triggered by my work, or like has to go at me as well, like as the writer. I just think, well, it's like I didn't say like at the beginning, like, oh, I agree with everything my characters say.
Yes.
I think
Also, this is a memoir. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like if I was going to do that, that's how I'd put it out there. And there's a very strange landscape when it comes to literary criticism nowadays, where I think people who are reviewing most likely shouldn't be reviewing, if I'm honest. Mainly because I don't think they're not using their critical thinking in the correct manner. Not to say that they can't think critically, which is debatable, but yeah, I think when you attack the writer, I think it's an indication of a breakdown between the author and reader relationship, which I think is a thing that's definitely fallen apart in terms of lots of relationships have fallen apart in this regard, I think, due to the rise of social media and the death of all kind of publications and all that kind of stuff. It's yeah.
I think also a lot of reviews now as well are just because of the social climate we're in. A lot of it's just now about like you said, listing what you found objectionable, or like this upset me, so 1 star. Where it's like maybe that's the point. Maybe it's supposed to make you feel a little uncomfortable, because I think that all great art, to be honest, I mean, everything that I really love has some level of like uncomfortability to it.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like people, it actually goes into a question I was going to ask you, is like how do you think that the whole world of trigger warnings and censorship, how do you think that has affected the kind of stuff that you want to write? And do you see it getting any better, or do you think it's just going to get worse?
The latter part of the question's an interesting one. I don't know whether it will get better. I'd like to think it would reach a point where it would become so absurd that it would capitulate in on itself, essentially. So everything becomes so censored that people just lose their will to live, maybe, because it's just like, I mean, how sensitive can you be? I was actually talking to Sebastian Weiss from Outcast Press just about this. What do you think of like sensitivity readers? Have you heard of these like types?
I just heard about that the other day when I was listening to. Oh no, it was this morning because I listened to the Lauren Sapala.
Yeah, because we were on that subject and he was commenting on a few things that I was saying about editors. But sensitivity.
Well, I think it's bullshit. Bullshit.
I heard about them probably a couple of years ago now, actually, when I was first starting, or when I was in the middle of FUBAR. Might have even been longer ago. But I just couldn't believe even just the concept of it. A sensitivity. So this is someone who combs through your fucking manuscript and looks for things that some people might find offensive. Well, so take your pick. Like, I don't know what there's no point in even publishing it then. I might as well just put out a notebook for people to just put their thoughts out there. But I just find how has that even happened? And I do think it is to do with the whole, it's definitely to do with the woke kind of culture, but it's also just this entitlement of people that just because they're from a certain group, ethnicity or sexuality or gender, then they seem to think that they have this right to say you can't do this and can't do that. And it's like the level of entitlement and stupidity with that is just unfathomable to me. Like I can't understand how that's risen up. And I just think it's to do with social media, and it's to do with the level of retardation that's going on the planet, where basically like the morons are in charge and they're telling us what we can and can't say and what we can't read, what needs to be censored and cancelled and whatnot. And you just think, I think a lot of it is over embellished, for sure, especially by the right and by corporations. I think they are kind of trying to put people like in this us versus them mentality all the time. So it's slightly conspiratorial, but I think that's where a lot of it is focused in on, because it's much easier to, if you divide the people, then you can carry on with your own business kind of thing, and no one's going to complain about it because they're too busy railing against someone who wrote a naughty word in a book. So
that's the kind of thing I can't believe, like getting offended over a singular word in an entire book. It's insane.
Yeah, like especially when it's a word. I mean,
yeah.
I can appreciate some of them have a history. That isn't favourable, but it's still just a word, and it's your association. Being offended is only really a confession of your own personality, I'd say, and like a sensitivity issue that you have, not one that you should point out to other people, I think literature is a trigger warning in of itself. It should never have to like explain itself. But in a world where everything's on the surface, it's become a thing. Like you see it on YouTube quite a lot. Like, oh, this is potentially going to trigger people. It's got, all this kind of thing. And it's like, well, fine. Like, just show me. It's like, I thought that was a given when you see, like, I think maybe they should introduce, like, age ratings, but properly on YouTube, like they used to with cinema. So you could say, oh, this is for people 12 and above, 15, 18, whatever. Yeah. Maybe that would be a way around it, because I think maybe what's happened is because everything was free for all at the beginning with YouTube. It obviously was, and I can appreciate it's very difficult to, to overlook something which has billions of hours of content uploaded to it every day. It's very difficult to keep an eye on that. But yeah, I do think something needs to change within it. Maybe certain channels, like if I could rate my channel, I'd rate it an 18. I'd say, well, it's not for kids. I know that. It's for people who are adults in terms of the way they think, not necessarily how they behave, but yeah. But yeah, the whole trigger warning thing, I mean, I don't really get it. I mean, look at like computer games where they're, GTA, you can do what the fuck you want. Just look at the Bible. I mean, should the Bible come with a trigger warning? Probably.
That's like one of the biggest pieces of transgressive fiction, I reckon, that I've looked at.
Completely. Yeah.
I haven't read the whole thing, but
yeah.
It's too big.
God, it's the most brutal, psychopathic transgressive, irremediable character you could ever hope not to be. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it is to do with creating bullshit hysteria in order to up the hype a lot of the time, so people get hyped. It's like the Dave Chappelle thing. It's like, I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure it's literally a nothing story, but it's been overblown and people are just so eager to be triggered, yet pretend that they, really care. It's a joke.
Yeah, I think that whole thing was just like, I mean, I didn't look too deeply into it because I knew it was just going to piss me off, but I mean, especially with comedians, like their job is to offend to a certain extent. I think that's their job, is to make jokes and say things that other people aren't going to say. And if they can't do that anymore, then what's the point of their job? I don't understand,
Oh yeah, completely.
And I also think the fact that this trigger warning stuff or whatever has infested like universities, I think that's a worry. That's why I did a course for about 2 weeks at a place called CIT here in Canberra. It's like sort of an equivalent to university, but like anybody can enroll basically. So I did a filmmaking course and I was there for 2 weeks, and we got to a point where they were like, okay, we're not going to be looking at any white male filmmakers because we don't want to, I can't even remember what they said. It was something stupid like, we don't want to endorse the patriarchy or something, and we're trying to look at new avenues. And I was like, and I went up to my professor or whatever afterwards, and I was like, okay, have you seen a Tarkovsky film? And he's like, who's that?
Yeah.
I was like, you're a film, and you don't know who Tarkovsky is. And like, these people are teaching and they're saying we can't talk about, the greatest filmmakers that have ever lived just because they're white dudes. Like, I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
And so I was like, okay, bye, see ya. And I just got out of there.
A lot of the time, the point is not even relevant to what it's supposedly against, because if the patriarchy was supposedly, in full force and it was only the white man who could make fucking movies, then it stands to reason that the best movies are going to be made by white men still. Even if you are trying to go against it, you still want to watch the best. But it's interesting. I mean, I was reading Capitalist Realism again, and I'm sure Tarkovsky was mentioned. Solaris and what is it? Stalker, I think.
Stalker, yeah.
Yeah. And
Have you seen those films?
The point was more to do with like how capitalism will point to like Soviet Russia and say like, you don't want to live in this regime. But then his point was like all these fucking movies were still made within these regimes, like these brilliant works of art. Yet in the time we live in, fuck all is made, basically. Like nothing new, nothing challenging. Everything's just a rehash of some nostalgic piece of the past that never really existed in the first place. And it's interesting like how it reverses or claims that it's like, oh no, this isn't our fault as capitalism. This is this fault or whatever. But yeah, I mean that's exactly the same point as well. You got a fucking film teacher who knows dick all about the history of cinema. It's not really. I
think he said
they're saying the fact that they're saying like, oh, we're not going to watch any white dudes. It's like, well, you're getting rid of like 90% of all films, then, aren't you? Pretty much.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, like, so we're not going to talk about like Kubrick and Hitchcock and all these like
the greats.
Yeah, the people that pioneered filmmaking, and we're not going to talk about them. Just doesn't make sense. Yeah, I think that's why I used to want to be a filmmaker, but I think the kind of films that I want to make are just so nobody would like fund them.
Nah. I mean, that's kind of, I think that's kind of why this community as small as it is, I think that's why it's starting to grow and get some traction, because we're all a bit fucking sick of it, to be honest. And I think the only way you can even create freely anymore is to try and find other people with similar interests and to band together. Especially if you want to make movies, you can't do it on your own. You need help. That's the thing. It's
exactly.
Impossible. It's very hard to make a film, because I've got history in that as well, and it's.
Yeah, you're an actor for a while, right?
Yeah, and I did some a bit of editing here and there. I did do a film course actually, which was about 3 months. I did that for a really long time ago. Things weren't as bad back then, but the course really, all it told me was like, you need a lot of money. That's all it was. It's like, you need a fucking bungload of money, otherwise forget about it, kind of thing. I think that's changing, because if you're innovative enough, you could feasibly make a film on your iPhone nowadays. If you've got the right idea, you just have to be open to kind of unorthodox kind of methods. I think it's still doable. It won't be what what you have in mind, but in terms of like even CGI I think it's learnable nowadays. If you find the right cause, you can. It might not look how you want it to look, but there are ways around it, basically, especially for people who are determined. And it's the same with writing, I would say. There are ways of learning if you're willing to put in the effort, and and that are feasibly completely free as well. Like if you're really determined. But again, I mean, it's just, I think this is a reaction to exactly what you just brought up, is the fact that, we're not going to study the greatest directors of all time because patriarchy. It's just like, it gets stuck in an argument that is redundant to the actual subject. So it's like, well, what relevancy does it have? It's like going on about, I don't know, something that happened in the 80s that's stopping us doing it. It's like, why does one thing equate to the other? It doesn't make sense,
Yes, it doesn't make sense.
What's that got to do with the price of fish? I believe is the kind of quote. It's like, it's immaterial, But no, patriarchy, and it makes it, oddly enough, it makes you like the Michael Harlow type of character. It makes you you get that kind of bit of rage in you where you're like, fuck you, it's just like, this is ridiculous. And you start to get, and the more you feed into that, the more it just perpetuates the same problem, because it does create that division.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's why people are, like you said, that's why the community's growing, I think, and more people are seeking out those stories that really challenge, like, the way things are at the moment. Like, there was something about reading Fubar and Heather both that was, like, really freeing. I felt like I was kind of, like, because there's just mountains and mountains of shit now. Like, when you walk into a bookstore, it's just all shit. And then, except for the classics, and so reading your work, I felt like I was kind of, it's almost like I was reading something published in the 80s or the 90s or something. Like Crash, like J.G. Ballard or something. Like, I don't think that would ever get published now. There's no way.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I think the only writer that I know who would get published is Michel Houellebecq. And he's...
Yeah.
But I think it's because he's established. And he has been going for a lot longer than I think I originally presumed. So, and because he's got a name, that's the thing. If you've got a name, I think you're good. If you're Bret Easton Ellis, you get the go ahead. But then that creates a big problem for people who aren't known, because, I don't think any publisher wants to take a risk anymore.
That's exactly it. Yeah, the risk.
With a work like mine, I might get lucky at some point if I do seek kind of traditional publishing, but I still think it would be a relatively unknown kind of indie press. I really doubt someone like a Penguin might come along if I suddenly get like some sort of fame or whatever. Then they might be like, oh, we're interested now because we're going to make money from you, So yeah, there's a lot of the problem is, I think what's happened as well is there's a kind of distrust between, well, all of these kind of institutions and the gatekeepers, like, and because they don't want to take a risk on unknowns, and unknowns such as ourselves, I don't think we want to take a risk with them because we don't know what they're going to do with our material anymore. We don't know, you know. I think they take something like Fubar, chop it in half, give it a happy ending, and, you know, probably change the title, you know, ruin the whole kind of original point or reason I actually put it to paper. So, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it's about reconstructing the whole system in a sense, because I just think everything's kind of fallen apart. I think maybe people need to know what they're getting into if they discover like our channels or whatever, or what type of literature we're covering. And yeah, there needs to be some sort of change, but I don't know what it is at the moment. So
I think that's a good point you made about us actually not wanting to trust them, because I like with my writing, I don't think I'd ever want to hand it off to like Penguin or something, even if they wanted it, which is a long shot. But I feel like if they, because I feel like they, like you said, they just completely sanitize it, and when it was published, it'd be so far from what I envisioned.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question is, you know, talking about, you know, the extreme side of literature, what do you think makes the extremes so affecting? So like an example would be, and this is a spoiler for Heather, but so on my reread, the scene that really stuck out to me and like upset me for days was the bit where he has sex with her dead body and like takes a chunk out of her shoulder or whatever and just swallows it. And I'm like, that's so, like, it's so fucked. But there's something about it that I was like, it just works so well. And I couldn't understand why it kind of glued the whole thing together for me. And I feel like if you had toned that down, something would have been lost. So what do you think it is about those really, really extreme moments that have such a deep effect?
I think they're, in my work especially, they're usually like the indication that all is fucked, basically, and that the return to the bestial and the Sonian, I think, as Camille Paglia would put it, is that underground element of nature that's totally chaotic and without rhyme or reason. And I mean, in Michael's case, in that instance, he's fucking outraged by her behavior and his own behavior and everything that's capitulating all around him. I originally always, like, there's a moment before he enters the house where he has this kind of Edgar Allan Poe-esque kind of like, like something haunts him about the place. And I think it's because he knows that something fucked up is going to happen. Merely for the fact that he's inside some schoolgirl's house, you know, it's like he's already kind of in that criminal kind of like mindset, and knowing that he's doing something that he really shouldn't be, like so I think there is, and there is an element of doom about it all. Like it's like out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of got that it's got that gothic element to it.
Definitely felt like that.
It's affecting in this instance, to get to your question, because in a sense, I think Heather was his suicidal ideation, and I think when he finally sees that, when it's reflected back to him, like it takes over him, and it kind of it turns him into like the beast that we've been witnessing the whole time. So he kind of like finally, I think that's when he properly loses it, and he turns into like that cannibalistic animal that I think we're all ancestors of, basically. Like that's our ancestry. Like if we go back far enough, in our evolution. I think it all comes out with that's what we came out of, and I think that reptilian part of the brain is always there. Like I think it only takes a certain amount of events before like you just crack and turn into like So
like a return to the primal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think because at that moment he thinks like life is over pretty much. So I think it's like he doesn't he has sex with a corpse and tries to eat a raw kind of thing. Like it does turn into proper chaotic.
Yeah. I never thought about it like that. Like he was just sort of like completely, all of his inhibitions just disappeared, and he's like, "Fuck it, I feel like taking a bite," and then he just does, and it's like this kind of really intense like primal moment.
Yeah, I mean, Cody made the point that what beauty can turn into like putrid ugliness kind of thing, and I think especially when it's obsessed over, and his obsession with Heather blinded him to the reality of her a lot of the time. And I think most guys actually can relate to that, where we put a beautiful woman on a pedestal. Yeah, it's just like that. We have that. I don't know what that comes from either, but look at like Helen of Troy kind of thing. It's like women can start major world wars kind of thing. It's like we do get really obsessed. And I suppose it's the dangers of that, because I do think it can blind us to reality, especially. And
it almost
story is rejection of reality. Really, he doesn't.
Yeah. It almost goes back to that, like it's almost like the whole, like when you're going a bit nuts and you think that everything you're doing is perfectly logical, but then you look back and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? When you're really into someone, it can be like that. You can look back on that period and be like, what was I, like all of these warning signs that like my mates pointed out to me or whatever, and you're just like, no, you don't know, man. And then when you come out of it, you're like, what the fuck was I even? I think that.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's like, because I've had similar conversations with my mates in the past, and we're just like, we will roast each other because of like that person we were. And it's like, it makes you question. It's like, is it because you're getting laid? Is it as simple as that? Like that's all it is. It's like,
I think
blind, so you're like, no, I'm getting laid, so we'll ignore all the red flags of everything that's there. Or is it something else? I suppose it is. I think part of us wants it to work, but then you overlook the glaring flaws. Mainly because I think that, I think maybe it's a biological thing. Like you ignore it on purpose because not only are you getting sex, you're also getting intimacy and physical affection and all of that stuff. Being with the opposite sex as well is an elevated state, I would say. It's very different. Like I often feel more comfortable around my mates, or did at least. I think that changes as you age, but it's never quite the same as when you're comfortable with the opposite sex, I think, and that's rarer, but that's what makes it more special as well.
There is a real warmth to it. There's like a real, something that's like, because you can get comfortable with your mates or whatever, and you can have a real good connection, but to me, in my experience anyway, it's nothing like.
Nah, it's not. Yeah. It's probably the most beautiful thing in the world, really, the connection between a man and a woman. I think that's something that we're losing that as well. Like I think more, maybe it needs to be said more. And I think in Michael Harlow's case, it's done in the wrong way, but it's still the original kind of feeling. I don't think anyone can deny that. That's the thing, and that's what makes it. That's probably what's so harrowing about it, because really what he's doing is totally fucked. But there is that part of you that thinks, I know what it's like though when you get obsessed.
Yes.
It's like you don't give a shit about even if say she was 35, his age or older or whatever. She's still a big fucking red flag. That's the thing, is it doesn't really it becomes redundant. So the fact that he overlooks it all because of her age is actually immaterial in my mind. It's part of the story, but I don't think it's the significant part. person.
Well, I felt like I think the reason why it works so well is because his feelings are, from what I found anyway, his feelings are genuinely pure. Like they're, his feelings for her. Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's such a real feeling, and everyone can relate to it. And he wasn't. I don't know. Maybe you'll disagree, but from what I gathered, I don't think he was trying to manipulate her in any way.
Not Heather. No.
No, yeah, that's.
I think with I think she manipulates him more than anything.
Yeah, I have a question about that.
Yeah, sure. These things are like, they're all down to interpretation. There is an element of manipulation within Michael for sure. Like, I know that.
Yeah.
Especially with how his relationship to the reader, even though he will deny that he's even doing that's also a manipulative technique that he uses. Like, he's very conniving in that sense. But yeah, his feelings are pure. I think they come from a wrong place, but they're out of the desperation. I think loneliness actually provokes in us as well. Like, it can make us make very bad decisions as well. I think that's another kind of note that it's pointing out. Loneliness can make us do very strange things. I think that's also something that is possibly overlooked in the story because of the paedophilic element, or hebephilic, if you want to be technical. But yeah.
Well, I think, and I might cut this out. I don't know, but no. I think what made it so. I think why it had such a deep effect on me is because, and this might be a bit too personal, but I think because, like, I was on the other end of that when I was younger, in a kind of quite a, like, essentially I was a Heather, except I was a lot younger than her. And so when I was reading from his point of view, it was almost like it's like, oh, okay, that's what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like the connections were made in my brain, and the book kind of, I think, helped me a lot in that way. So I just thought I'd put that in there.
I'm actually very happy to hear that. In as sad as that is, because I mean, my own experiences, like, personally and in my other my real life relationships, they've always had this, like, you probably noticed it with Fubar, like, it was very touched on as well in there. And that's the reason it comes up a lot for me, because it's like something that has affected my personal life.
Yes.
And it's definitely, it's a hard thing to bring up because I know how other people interpret it nowadays, like, especially because it's almost like you mention these things and then it's like you are the perpetrator of it for some reason. Whereas it's more, I'm actually just looking at it from as many angles as possible, actually, which is hard to do because obviously it's a very affecting and, in most instances, a kind of traumatizing thing. But you need to understand it, and you need
for sure.
Yeah, you need to come to those conclusions. And I think with Michael, I think the thing that I found the most difficult, it was that recognition of still feeling like a kid myself a lot of the time and not knowing what the fuck I'm doing. That was a hard thing to delve into because it was like, is this how I feel? Like, it's like, probably, like, but I think everyone feels like that vulnerable child still. I think that's always with you. And also, trying to, I think, it was about his oddly enough, his paternal instincts, like, because he was alone and because he didn't have children of his own. Heather kind of encapsulated everything. Like, it wasn't just lover, it was kind of daughter as well. So it has this incestual.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah, so it's about him wanting to be that protector and provider and all of that stuff. And I think that's in a lot of men, actually, or even a lot of people in general. Like, I think that paternal, maternal, whatever you want to call it, I think that's in us, especially as you get older, because you start to realize how alone you are as well.
Yeah.
So it's and like you're raised in, for the most case, or most of us, you're raised in that familial environment. So when you get to the age that your parents were when you were born, you start and you don't have that. I think there is that weird emptiness that comes with it. It's like, oh, okay, this is the route I'm taking, or that's happened. Why is that?
Yeah.
And it's for many reasons, but all of these things are what I like to explore, and I find it sad that people are very very keen to avoid it. I find, and I just think
it doesn't make sense to me.
No, me neither. Like I find that's going to make it worse, surely, in the long run.
Because if you don't understand that aspect, I talked about this in my review actually. Like if you don't understand that aspect is part of being a human, then you're kind of walking through life with like a blindfold on.
Yeah. Willingly.
And then when
you're putting
and then when something really fucked happens, you're just like, it's you don't know how to process it because you never knew that it could happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You haven't tried to understand it at least, which is what I'm
very odd, I find. But
it's so strange.
Yeah, I mean, no.
I was just gonna say, my next question, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, because I don't want you to reveal any thing that you would like to keep up for interpretation. But my interpretation anyway was that Heather seemed like she was traumatized in some way, like from earlier on in her life, and like she was trying to weave some kind of narrative with Michael, like she was trying to set something up, kind of like Eric with his little script. Like it's almost like she was trying to set up the whole scenario as like as kind of like the ending to a narrative, sort of. It's like she was trying to relive something, or am I just grasping at straws?
No, that's totally in there. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
Okay.
I think I might have alluded to it already, but it might have been before we started recording. But regardless, there's the part where I think Michael confesses that he's just suicidal, and then that happens to be the moment that Heather walks into his life, and how much he projects onto that, I'll leave to interpretation. But it's not a mistake.
Right.
And Heather recognizes that in him, whether it's subconscious or not. Again, I think a lot of the time that part of the brain and the way we operate is in this like realm of the unknown, in a sense. We don't really know why we behave the way that we do, especially around people we're attracted to. We just don't get it. And I think that's a point that the novel makes as well. Like, you can think all these things you want about yourself, but you don't know whether, there's a great play by Edward Albee called The Goat. And that is quite literally a guy falling in love with a fucking goat. And he doesn't and it's very funny and black comedy kind of thing, but it's also fucking tragic because he's got this kind of, he's got a wife and they really love each other, but then he's like, I love this goat. It's just, and then that's the whole thing. And I
have to check that out.
In a way, I suppose I'm making a similar point, but I'm kind of doing it in a riskier fashion, saying like, well, this isn't that uncommon. I mean, they are the reason Edgar Allan Poe influences the story quite a bit is because of his history. He married his like cousin who was like 13 or something when he was in his 20s, or and he obviously in the in the 19th century that was more commonplace. But just because something doesn't happen anymore doesn't mean that it doesn't occur, that there isn't that allure and all that kind of stuff. And for Michael, like Heather is like the ideal woman, quote unquote. I mean, she's not quite a woman yet, but in terms of attraction, she's got it all. So it's like, sucks to be him in that moment, because it's like, that's a genuine standpoint as well. I mean, he does over elaborate on it, and he does obsess. But again, I think that's just another indication of the place that he's in at that moment. That's the problem. It's like,
yeah,
and we don't know each other's stories. That's the problem as well. Like, I think a lot of people do just take things on the face value, but we don't know what happened to Michael in his early life, because I think it's very similar to Heather's. I think there's a lot of that's the reason they're attracted to each other. They don't know it, but they've had very similar lives. And yeah, Heather is she does kind of plan it all, because it's like her swan song to life. Sense, like that's what the way I think anyway. That's I don't claim to know all of the intentions of my characters really, but I know what I'm suggesting.
yeah,
And yeah, Heather's I think she's a she's a zoomer basically, and she's very disillusioned by her, not only her generation but of the world in itself, and of where that's going, and this kind of narcissistic reverie that we're in, where it's just it's all just an illusion. And I think Michael,
well, as a zoomer, I can relate to that.
yeah, well, yeah, especially, I mean, I do, there's a kind of sympathy that I have for your generation actually, because I just think, because I had the crossover, I get to see the horror of what we're in now. But the world I grew up in never existed for you guys. And so I just think I feel for you in that regard. I mean, it still sucked. I mean, it's not much of a consolation, but at least it didn't have, I don't know, this relentless kind of, what would it be? I guess it's like that feeling like you're always watched and always judged, like everything you do. Yeah, it's like, especially with social media, like it's all this immediate pressure to be on it and to be active, and and if you're not on it, it must be very strange for other people, like and the depression and anxiety and everything that comes with all of that, it sucks. But
well, I think I've never really been able to connect with people of my generation, to be honest, because I feel like there's, like, most of my friends that I had when I was younger, I don't really have anymore, because our worldviews are just too different. Like, I grew up in a house where, like, both my parents were journalists, so they were very much about, like, it was their whole job to be talking about things that I guess people would rather not go near, right? And so when I wanted to have conversations like that with my friends, and they were like, you can't talk about that, that's offensive or whatever, or like I was told that I wasn't allowed to have certain opinions. And it's like if that's what people of my generation are like, then I don't see the value in connecting to them. I mean, James is an exception, I think.
No, I think James would he'd relate, actually. I think that's why he likes chatting to degenerates like me and Cody, because it's like, maybe, he probably doesn't see eye to eye with his generation. I don't think it's any mistake that's happened. I think his parents are slightly older than probably his, counterparts, but I don't know whether that makes a massive difference, really. It's all about the kind of environment you're in, the circumstances. But I think with political movements, especially, they're global now. They're like happening all over the place, except maybe in like the East or certain parts of Eastern Europe. Maybe I don't think they're as predominant. Right? But yeah, in terms of like the West, everything in the West is kind of everywhere. It's all the same. Especially like woke movements, like the woke parts of Australia, I think, are the same as in the UK and the States and Canada.
For sure.
Yeah. It's all, and that's because of the internet. So that's it's the double-edged sword of the internet as well. It's like, as good as it is to feel like we're all, experiencing the same kind of life, there's also that kind of negativity as well. There's a complete lack of any almost national identity now, I'd say, which maybe is a good thing. I don't know, but it's hard to not feel like you're part of your own roots, I think. And that's yeah, I don't know, just what it is, I guess. But
yeah, I think even because I'd probably say politically I'm more in line with somebody like Cody, but even talking to like other people who are, you know, I don't know if it makes me a socialist or whatever, but I'm against capitalism. I think it's horrendous. Even talking to other people who think that now, it's like we believe the same thing, but it's almost like we're looking at it from completely different perspectives or something. Sorry, my cat's just.
all right.
Sorry. All right, back over here. Sorry. All right. Yeah. So. Yeah, I guess that's my point. Yeah, I think she's back.
No, I've had cats like throughout most of my life. I know what they're like.
Yeah,
she don't get it.
She just gets the shits with me if I spend too long away from. Sorry.
Yeah, she's sweet.
She's very cute. All right.
Yeah, I think I'm of the perspective that I'm so left wing that I actually come across as a fascist, and I think that's my issue, because I have an issue with people who claim to be left wing and all socialist this bullshit, but really when it comes down to it, they're just as capitalistic and I would say right wing as the people they're supposedly against. So they're actually sycophantic champagne socialists. But again, I don't really try to adhere to any political stance apart from maybe anarchy. Like I just feel like there is no left wing anymore. Everything's right wing. Like it's not, if everything's neoliberal, and it's just everything's about the bottom line now. So
yeah, well, they've both. It's kind of met in the middle, hasn't it?
Yeah, basically. So yeah, and the left can't really go against it now because it's like, yeah, you should read Capitalist Realism. Actually, I think you'd enjoy it quite a lot. Like,
is that Mark Fisher one?
Yeah.
I've got The Weird and the Eerie by him, but I haven't read Capitalist Realism, so I should get that.
Yeah, I'm going to read that, and Ghost of My Life is the next one I'm going to read for a YouTube project. But yeah, I'll see how that goes first. I need to read them and then see where I'm at. But
yeah, so I guess I might ask you a few questions about Fubar now, if that's okay. Because I really loved it. I think I read a lot of, or I'm interested in Carl Jung. So what I noticed in Fubar was this whole thing of like Eric's shadow, and it's almost like it was like a narrator as well, or it was like interacting with Eric in some sense. So was that, I guess my question is, was that do you know about Jung? Was he kind of an influence on that whole concept?
The concept of the shadow side, yeah, for sure. That was a big influence on it. So it kind of all came out of my own kind of mental breakdown, I suppose. Once that's kind of what I realized, because around the age of about 27, 28, I kind of found that my the way I was living just wasn't really working out too well. I had this weird period of feeling a bit ghostly and not really. I don't really remember much of it, if I'm honest. Like until about 31, 32, like there's this kind of blip period.
And I can absolutely relate to that.
Yes, it's strange. I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I think maybe it's just you realise like how helpless you are in face of the world, and what you've learned thus far doesn't fucking match up enough, and it's like, yeah, you just kind of end up folding in on yourself, and if you manage to get out of that, then maybe you're in better stead for it. But yeah, it's a very odd period. I actually think a lot of religious texts point this out as well. There's a point where you feel like it's this weird rebirth almost if you get over it, because you get to like your 30s and you're like, okay, I'm still here. I've gone through all of that shit in the 20s. And then it does feel like you're kind of your second coming in a sense. I don't want to get too religious in my thinking, but
can
it
if you
does seem
want.
to come out. I mean, it's weird in writing as well. Like, I don't even have knowledge of it, but it seems to come out quite often. I think there's a definite, reason for that. But yeah, Jung and Freud and therapy itself, that was all part of it. That was,
Yeah. Have you? This is more of just a recommendation, but have you seen the film Cure, the Japanese film from 1997?
Cure?
Yeah, Cure.
No, I don't think so.
It's probably my favorite film, and it's also the scariest film that I've ever seen. But without spoiling it, it's basically about the kind of complete embracing of that shadow, basically. And like what happens when you just get rid of everything that, like, the basic, I think, statement of that film is that human beings are all awful, like when you get down to it. And I thought, I was like, yeah, that's really good. And I think for some reason when I was reading the whole shadow stuff, it reminded me of that film, because I think it's an interesting concept, but I haven't seen like that whole kind of the duality in a person actually executed that well. But I thought you did it really well, and I thought the film Cure also did it, just on a larger scale in that film. But yeah, just a recommendation.
Who's the director? If you remember.
Kiyoshi Kurosawa.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out. I'm surprised because I had a big Japanese cinema phase, so I'm surprised I haven't heard of this, especially given the subject matter. It sounds right up my street. So I'll check that out.
It is a horror film, but it's also like it's like a detective horror film, kind of. It reminded me of True Detective, with the whole cult kind of aspect. But do
you know how to spell the title by any chance?
Yeah, it's Cure. I'm gonna put my cat out, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can't believe I've never heard of this.
It's so good, man. It's my favorite film. I love it. It's
this tonight, actually. Yeah, because more like this is Pulse. That's a good film. Audition.
Yeah.
I loved Audition.
It was the same director that did Pulse, so.
Yeah, it sounds right up my street. I'm kind of glad I didn't read it as I was writing Fubar, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks great. And I actually agree. I think at our core, this is probably where my conservatism comes in, actually, because I do think once you abandon everything within you, like, it's an interesting question as well, because it's almost like, I think a lot of people think human beings are innately good. I think it's the opposite. I think if you break a person down enough, I think they just turn into an absolute monster overall.
Yeah.
I think the problem is if you ignore your shadow side, which I was going to say before, it's a good opportunity to bring it now. Because I think Eric does ignore it at the beginning, like it's there, but he's not really acknowledging it. So he's got that constant critic shadow kind of side, obviously really berating him for everything he does. But he's kind of just living as if it's not there, and he's continuing on. And the more you do that, which I think has been alluded by Jung and many psychologists, is that it will find itself erupting in in different ways. So you'll be at a social event or something, or the way somebody behaves will just trigger some sort of weird moment in you, and that's basically it breaking through. And when Eric goes through what he goes through, and he just starts to embrace this nihilism, this complete shadow side, that's when it's like, that's when he just wants to destroy the fucking planet. That's all he wants to do is bring down destruction, death, and and I think that's true. I do think like if you give yourself all of that power and of that kind of total freedom, it's interesting that that's the kind of first thing we go for as well. It's like, it's not about serenity and tranquility. It's I want things fucking destroyed, fuck this planet kind of thing. And it's like, it's very and I think that is relatable, because I do think we do feel that despair at being abandoned on this planet. Like, what are we doing here? Like, it's like, that's the thing. It's like, and I still, I had those moments. I kind of laugh at them now, because absurdity helps, Camus' absurdism. It does, there is a solace to be had in that. But sometimes it's not enough. And like, I just edge between that and nihilism, where I'm just like, what is this, Yeah. It just feels like one giant joke, really, that we're all at the expense of. It's just like,
it's just all a big prank.
Yeah.
Somebody will come out at the end and be like,
maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. Maybe it's because I think a good question, right? Like, if life did have meaning, would you want to know? Would you really want to know if it had meaning or not? Because if it does, then you're just gonna, it would just, I think it would ruin the whole illusion of free will, at least. Like, well, even the notion of it is just absurd. You don't get to choose fuck all. Biology, the need to eat, like breathe.
I completely agree.
Yeah, it's just like,
Well, I think the idea of there being an objective meaning is scarier to me than there not being, in a way. Because like that's so much to live up to. Like there's this kind of, if there's an objective meaning, like it means you've only got like one purpose, whereas I would rather decide what my
I'd rather have purposelessness actually overall as well, because that would just mean that you're the slave of some being that is so powerful you can't even comprehend it. That's fucking terrifying to me. You're just some like shrew, basically.
It's Lovecraftian. The idea of God is Lovecraftian.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually another thing that I delved into with Fubar a bit, is that underground subterranean element of nature itself, where how it operates. Because of our perspective, I can't see it being anything other than just fucking cruel. Like, it's just brutal. It's just savage, dog eat dog. Like, the only way life replicates itself is by destroying life itself. Like, it's very, like, the way the circular kind of element of it, the Ouroboros kind of snake eating its own tail, all of that. Yeah, I'm complete, like, that's the way I see it. And as beautiful as any sunset can be, it's only my own nature telling me that. And it's only an illusion. Like, it's not really, like, when you dig deeper into nature and see how it operates, it's fun. And quantum physics comes into that, then it's even more like, what the fuck? It's like, it's totally fucking all over the place. Incomprehensible, basically. I think that's probably the part that I can't reconcile myself with, maybe. Like, not that I could ever understand it, but I think just as a species, I think there are elements to nature that we haven't got a fucking hope of understanding ever.
I think that's why like when I was younger and my dad used to force me to go on really long hikes through the outback bush or whatever, like, so, and it always used to scare the shit out of me, because I was like, we're in the middle of this all-consuming environment. Like, I don't want to camp in the middle of this woods. You know what I mean? Like, it's everything. It feels like we shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I don't like camping here, and like, this is like what a pussy I really am. But more just because it's just not comfortable. It's like, no, we made houses and
Yeah.
it's much more comfortable. It's like, why would I want to go back into fucking nature? Nature was brutal and nature's trying to eat me. So I don't want.
Yeah.
But in Australia, I'd imagine. Is it true? Like, are you in a place where there are like dangerous fucking animals and bugs and shit around?
Oh yeah, like there's
Really?
in summer there's snakes that come out that can kill you in like 5 minutes. Like when you get bitten, like that's it.
Wow.
And there are spiders like the other day, like crawling right up across there. There was a little white tail, and they don't kill you, but they make you so sick that you have to go to hospital for like. And if you look up white tail bite in Google, there's like people with their arms like swollen and pussy and red, and it's just like,
Wow.
it's terrifying.
Yeah.
That's why whenever I go for a walk, and I like brush my head on like a leaf, like a low hanging branch, I always panic and go like that because it's like, who knows? You never know.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was in Spain, there's nothing really like that, but it's weird. Insects behave slightly differently in certain different places. Yeah. I didn't even think of it really, but it's obvious. But yeah, certain like spiders, they bite you, like intentionally bite you, and flies bite you as well. And it's like, the fuck? It's like I wasn't used to that because you only have like, mosquitoes and stuff. That they'll obviously take a bite out of you, but yeah, in terms of like flies, and it fucking hurts as well. Like and that's just in Spain. So in Australia, I'd imagine I'd be very, I wouldn't wear shorts out, even though the weather's like boiling. I'd just be a bit cautious, like unless I'm in the main urban area, I'd just be like, nah, fuck that.
Well, like those white-tailed spiders as well, they're like aggressive. So you can just be walking down a hallway, like minding your own business, and it'll just like fly off the fucking wall at you because you walk past it. And they go for you if you invade what they perceive as their territory. Like they're like, this is my area, fuck off. And they'll like go for you. So it's scary, man. It's like if you see one, kill
it. Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, we'll do. If I'm ever in Oz. So.
Yeah. Yeah, if you come to Australia and you see a whitetail, either get the fuck out of the room or get like a newspaper.
Are they how big are they? Are they your standard size?
No, they're pretty small.
Okay.
Which it kind of makes them scarier to me. they're like I don't know. Really? They're pretty tiny. And redbacks as well. We got a thing called redbacks. But anyway, we're talking about spiders now. So, all right. I'm just thinking about what would be the best question to ask next. Oh yeah, this is a good one. I found that in your writing there seems to be like a kind of a distinct absence of hope. And so, which to me, I always look for that because it validates my worldview. But I find that even with something like True Detective, like there's like Russ Cole or whatever goes on about how hopeless and pointless everything is, and then at the end for some reason he just like has a speech about how everything's. But in yours, I feel like
that ending. Did you buy it overall? Because I find it's a bit. The only justification I can give for that is that Russ Cole has just been through a very traumatic experience, and his brain, due to that trauma, has conducted that kind of narrative to give him like a reason to survive, a reason to go on. So I actually think he's in a delusion at that point. That's why he's like, oh my god, the light's winning. It's like, fuck off, mate. It's like, I think that's the only way I can look at it and go, okay, yeah, that's fine. The original
I just didn't buy it.
Nah, I don't. That's the only way I can buy it, is that he's going through that kind of traumatic, oh, this is all meaningful kind of bullshit, because that's what the brain does as well. There's a great animation. The title doesn't make it sound like, but it's called "It's Such a Beautiful Day." I recommend that massively.
Okay.
Actually, it's one of my favorite animation film by a long way. But it delves a little bit into that kind of brain trauma and how the mind will just create some weird kind of narrative that makes no fucking sense, but it does it because it needs to let you get through it, kind of thing. It needs to,
Yeah.
But yeah, the original detective ending was supposed to be they're supposed to die in that maze.
Yeah.
I think that would have been so brutal if they did, like, that was it. They were just lost. Or
that would have been so good.
It would have been great. I think that would have been. And then no more fucking season 2 bullshit. Just leave it at that. Let it just. They missed a trick.
Didn't he write that second season in about a week or something?
Well, I mean, may as well have done. Yeah, because it was pony. But
real bad.
The third one was all right. I thought it had something. I thought it was arguably sadder. I thought, because of the kind of adventure element. But yeah, in terms of, to go to the hopelessness, I don't intend to write like that, I have to admit. I mean, my next anthology is probably the most nihilistic thing I'll come up with. I think there's zero hope to be had in it. But I kind of feel like that's my if there's a standpoint that I have, like, it is to remind people of the hopelessness, even though that sounds all like doom and gloom and all that. I don't actually think it is. I think it's more, I just want to be a reminder of the fact that hope itself is actually quite damaging, and a lot of the disappointment we feel with life comes from the fact that we've hoped for it to be something else. So hope's a bitch as well, because it kind of gives a promise of something without any reason. Like, there's no reason for you to, and we're duped, we're suckers for it. It's like if you buy a lottery ticket, there is that tiny part of you that goes, oh, you never know. And this is what advertising companies and marketing, they're channeling into that weakness all the time. So I'm trying to toughen you up, essentially. Like, I'm trying to say, like, no, don't be a fucking sucker. Like, you're going to get duped. People are going to walk all over you if you think this way. And we all experience that. So in essence, I'm just trying to warn against it, because I just think anyone who tells you they know what's going on, or they know what you need, they're a con artist, and they're trying to swindle you, basically.
All this self-help nonsense.
Self-help, religion, fucking.
I love that video, by the way, that you put up.
Yeah.
Really good.
Oh, cheers. Yeah, it's hopefully. I don't really know what I'm doing with the YouTube thing at the moment. I think I'm just exploring concepts and ideas. I was going to do the kind of reaction stuff, and I probably will do it from time to time if something pisses me off. But I still feel like literature is just something I can't really move away from, and maybe for good reason. I think it's so I just feel like I'm going to dive into that a bit more in terms of, like, or even just ideas. I like to bring up what books you should fucking read, basically. I think
Yeah. I really liked that video you did. Who was that cunt, the incel guy?
Oh, the Think Before You Sleep.
Yes, yeah, I really liked that video, and I did some. I had a peek at his channel after I watched that video, and it's just all complete and utter, like, I've never heard such bullshit in my life.
Yeah, if you want real hopelessness, fucking watch his channel. That's what I think. It's like that's where I get my despair from. I'm just like. Yeah. The fact that it's even popular just amazes me, and his fans are actually more depressing than he is, believe it or not. So I'm still
that comment section on your video.
It might be worth doing a video on that. I have to admit. I mean, James is keen for it, but I thought it was just for the shits and giggles. element.
Mm.
But it might actually be interesting just to delve into that mindset, because I think they're all mentally ill overall.
I think the incel thing is because the thing I'm writing right now, I kind of realized that the main character's like he's got incel vibes. So I just sort of like I was like, I better look into this a bit more. And then I think for a day I just went down the rabbit hole and I was like, I can't do this anymore. It was too much.
That's actually why I made that video as well, because it was still in me from the Michael Harlow days.
Yeah.
And I remember I was, that kind of, it's weird, that content, man. It gets into you, whether you like it or not. And I think that's exactly what it's trying to do. That's why I find it's important to have videos, even if I am just fucking roasting, then it needs to be out there, because I think people are just so easily duped into it. And it's very attractive to go, this is all women's fault, nothing to do with us. Like, it's like,
well, it's the easy way out, isn't it?
The fact that we live in a world where incel is a thing that people will actually attribute themselves to and identify with is very emblematic of like, we're fucked. It's like, why would you ever want to say, oh yeah, as an incel, I'm offended.
But even when I was like a teenager, if you were like an incel, like that meant you were going to get your head shoved down a toilet. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't something that you announced yourself as. Whereas now it's sort of like, I think it goes back to the whole, and the left does this as well. Like it goes back to the whole, like a relishing victimhood thing.
Yeah, big time.
Because I think that's a big problem at the moment. Like the whole, and I think people are looking for it as well. Like
it's
they'll read a book
between being the victim and also feeling morally superior. And this is what a lot of conspiracy theorists do, because they have that thing of like, oh yeah, me and you, we know the truth, but at the same time we're being victimized. So you get the best of both worlds, because you get no responsibility for who you are because you're the victim, and you also get to be on the moral kind of what would it be? The moral high ground. You know, so you get the best, you know, and that's mental illness, because you're literally blinding yourself and finding connections that aren't there and listening to morons who are just, you know, some of the shit that guy says as well is just like, there's no basis or foundation of what he's saying. And yet these idiots of his fan base, they just take his word, like, because he's got, you know, I think he did a degree in, one of them said he did it in sports psychology, and I'm just like, well, what point? What is that? He never talks about sport, so it's like, what relevance is that? Like, that's complete. I don't understand what they're talking about, but those right wing types, man, they're very difficult people.
I think they're as bad as, you know, the kind of woke.
They are.
I think they're
even more easy to trigger, and like, and they love it as well. They relish it. They love being triggered. That's what, they can't get away from that video. They're all still fucking watching it and commenting on it all the time. They love it. Admittedly, it's all in a way that I probably wouldn't like, but I don't really care anymore. I'm just kind of leaving it alone and just letting it sit there. And I'm hoping that a few of them might just watch it, and they don't have to agree with me. But if it gives that kind of shadow of doubt on the whole thing, then that's what the video's done its job, I would say. Because it's just that's what I'm trying to do, is just kind of say, like, you know, they're doing exactly what they're accusing the other side of doing, duping you and making you believe that, you know, you're the victim, you're the one being ostracized and all of that stuff. And it's not easy, because there are some points that are relevant. I do think the woke culture has, like we were saying earlier, like, oh, we're not going to study white guys who's directed the best films ever made because patriarchy, you know, it's ridiculous. But then the other extreme is just as absurd. So I think it's about trying to find some fucking sense, basically, something, some logic in the whole thing. But
well, I think the whole idea of being an incel is absurd in the first place. Because, I mean, you can get laid if you really want to.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's almost like they like it in a way.
I think they only like thoughts. That's the problem. They only want girls who would, e-girls. That's what they want. And because e-girls don't give a shit about them, they just want their money. They're fucking really pissed off. There's another one I might do a video on, but what he does is he reacts to female channels. But the only women he ever picks are obviously quite dumb. Usually, they're usually obsessed with material nonsense. So it's like, obviously these women aren't the ideal type of woman, but then to you guys they are, because they don't have their own minds, or they don't, God forbid they are intellectually challenging, because they're not. They're all about makeup and certain ways of thinking, and they're just a bit lacking in my view. But it's just very easy to pick them and go, oh yeah, look at these women, look at the way they behave and all this kind of stuff. And it's like you're taking a really small section of women in society and then pointing the finger at them. But you love those thoughts. That's the thing. They love it. That's what they're really pissed off about. Is they're attracted to easy and manipulative sluts, basically. That's the thing. And they're obsessed because their own internalized misogyny makes them resent and also adore those type of women. That's my analysis, at least.
Yeah, well, I agree. And I think that also they would probably rather, pay some girl online for pictures of her tits than actually going out to a bar and talking to someone.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, of course you're not. Anyway, I just think that it's so absurd.
I'd love to see them, to see what they're actually like. Like,
I knew a few.
Did you?
Looking back
because
on
some of them are quite normal. But it was interesting.
Yeah.
What's the book? I'm going to forget the title of it now. I think it's over there. Yeah, Coincidate with David R. Lowe.
Yes.
Like he delves into it, but he kind of mentioned how one of the Chad characters who is getting like all the ass and all that kind of stuff, his mindset is still very incel, because the way he sees women and the way he kind of assumes this kind of robotic way of thinking that they possess, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think that's where they go wrong. It's partially due to their narcissism as well. That is like all paranoia, which is very closely linked, where they kind of just they presume everyone thinks the same way, and like they're always calculating and trying to be what's the word they love? I can't remember what it is now. Hypergamous. Yeah, they're always, the women are just...
I've never heard that in my life.
Yeah, so hypergamy is that whole thing of like they're only ever seeking men of higher status and wealth and all that kind of stuff, and that's
bullshit as well.
Yeah, complete bullshit.
Because I think all of my female friends who are attractive have kind of average looking boyfriends. So I don't understand what... I mean, it's just like... Anyway. I think it's all...
Most of my girlfriends have been wealthier than I have as well, in terms of like...
Same here.
So it's even from our anecdotal experiences, it's disproven. And that's just two.
Yeah.
There's two guys. So yeah, it's bollocks, basically.
That short film, Incel, I think I heard you talk about it and I looked it up.
It's good, isn't it? Did you watch it?
So good, man. Yeah, it's so good. That main guy, the main actor, he's incredible.
Yeah, he's really good. Like, he should be in. I hope he does well, because I thought he was really fucking convincing.
Especially that opening scene where he just like loses his shit at that girl in the library.
Yeah.
I was like, shit, I've seen that. Like, I've seen it at parties.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've seen guys like, they try and get in with this girl and she's like, oh, fuck off, I'm not interested. And then it's almost like it's like they believe now that their entire being is going to tumble down and reduce to nothing because this girl rejected them. And then they start screaming, and like this one guy I remember was just like, "Fuck you, you stupid cunt," and he was just like losing it. And I was just looking at that, how how self-conscious and unhappy with yourself do you have to be to have that reaction?
Mm-hmm.
It just, it's mental illness, like the whole.
Well, it makes me think it must be because they're spending so much time online on these stupid forums watching stupid videos that are just constantly reinforcing this idea. So it's like the indoctrination of inceldom that they're internalizing. And then obviously when they're out in the real world, that's building up. So anytime a girl even just looks at them in the wrong way, they're like, "You fucking slut," you know. And it's like they just immediately snap. And they're just like, wow, yeah, it's proper. Yeah, it's. I mean, that's one part of the internet that I do, you can't control. And I think people need to be more wary of what they're getting into when they log on online, because there's so many fucking predators out there.
Yeah.
And not just in the sense that they're trying to groom you, but they are trying to do that in a way. They're trying to make you see things in a certain way. I mean, the one I was alluding to earlier, like every fucking video is always like, "Yeah, come on the Patreon, yeah, come on over," and it's just like it never mentions like basically saying, "Come give me money and I'll listen to your bullshit. Give me money, you know." And it's like, yeah.
And also, it seems like it never occurs to them to maybe. It's like maybe it's you, maybe it's not the girls, maybe you're just a prick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe you need to kind of. It's this inability to self-reflect. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Comes with it.
I mean, it's not nice being. I think we've all experienced it, that rejection. But I would have thought that most
it's terrible.
guys, don't we get that when we're about 12, 13? Like we just, you get a bit obsessive with some, cute girl in your class or whatever. But you just don't know how to talk to them because you're a 13-year-old boy. You just don't.
Yeah.
But then you just, you take that rejection like a man. You're just going to take it on the chin. But then you also got to know what you're offering. Like there's certain, like in that Coincidate book, there's a character called Barry, and really, like he looks like a proper incel. Like he actually has reason in a sense, like because he just doesn't have any good bone structure. He's not a good-looking guy, yet he wants the fucking hot Russian exchange student. Like he wants the hottest girl in the school, and it's like, dude, like you're just setting yourself up for absolute, devastation.
It's like you gotta realize where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a hard fact of life, I think, and there is a lot of problem nowadays where people feel really entitled, and they have these delusions of like what they can get from life in general, not just in partners, but just in general. And it's like, no, you've got to know what know who you are a bit more, and I think that's something people should explore. And it doesn't have to define you; it doesn't matter overall. Like I think you just have to, deal with the chips that you were dealt, and that's about it. But
yeah, I think it is kind of that 13-year-old mentality, isn't it?
Basically,
like when you, like I don't know if you did this at your school or whatever, but like at mine, it was always like you go up to a girl you thought was cute, and you'd be like, "Oh, do you want to go out with me?" And then they're like, "No, fuck off." And you're like, "Oh, okay." And then you leave.
"No, you've never spoken to me, you weird fuck." And it's like, "Oh yeah." Yeah.
Like, good point.
Yeah. I think mine was. I don't know. I found it difficult when I was. The world I grew up in, man, it was so fucking different. Like it's incomparable to now. Like we weren't all in the. I assume kids nowadays they've all got iPhones and shit. In school, it's like none of us had phones. Like that wasn't.
I saw a 4-year-old with an iPad the other day. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly. So, And what they must be looking up as well. I mean, they must be watching porn at the age of fucking 9, 10, I would have thought. Like, because I saw it when I was like 12, maybe, yeah, probably younger, 11. And I think they're exposed to it from a much younger age.
Yeah, for sure.
Imagine if you were like 8 and you had a fucking iPhone. You'd be like, boobs. And then
the shit I look up.
Yeah, the shit you're going to see. Yeah, there's no way. No fucking way you can avoid it. Or even protect it as a parent. Like, because kids know these devices better than the parents know them. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things, like the earlier you're exposed. Like the 4-year-old with the iPad, I bet they're a whiz on it. I bet they know exactly, like...
Yeah. They're probably better at that than reading.
Oh, for sure. Reading's old hat. No one's bothering with that anymore. You have to actually concentrate and like have your attention focused on one thing. No chance, you know.
Yeah, the reduction in like literacy, or not even just literacy, but like people actually picking up a book and trying to understand its content.
Yeah,
is
bad.
Shocking. It's.
I often go to like coffee shops or even the park when it's decent to read.
Mm.
And it's rare that I see other people doing the same thing. I mean, it does happen, but say if I go every day during a week, I'll probably see one person on one occasion reading at the same time that I am, and that's it.
For me, it's even less than that.
Yeah, this is out of like, I don't know, hundreds of different people.
Mm.
And you just think, if this is the average, like, it's no wonder like I'm not selling books. It's like no fuckers reading anymore. Like,
well, they also assume that it's like for school or something. Like I've had people be like, "Oh, is that for school?" I'm like, "No."
No, it's
yeah.
You can't. To people who don't read, I don't even think it's worth associating with people who don't read. I got a
Same.
Who he has read. He doesn't read quite so much nowadays. But I'm just constantly telling him, like, it's because you're always on that fucking thing.
Yeah.
You can't. It ruins your ability to concentrate. It really does as well. Like, it fucks you up.
That's why I try and limit my phone. I think I only do 5 minutes a day or something.
Really?
Yeah, because I can't, if I do any more than that, I'll get like, I'll start. It's like a drug. Like 10 minutes later, you'll be like, oh, fuck, what, you know, I need to look at Instagram, you know? And then it's like, if I just do 5 minutes a day and then put my phone somewhere else, it's like, usually then I can sit down for a few hours and read, and it's just all right or whatever.
Yeah, whenever I sit down to write or to read, it's just, I have to kind of almost switch off the option in my head. I'm just like, with a phone, I normally, if I'm here, I'll put it away somewhere, because it's like I just don't want it in my sight. I don't even want the spurious thought to come up, because I've seen it. I'm like, oh, I'll have a quick check. No, and if I'm in the coffee shop, it's in my pocket, so I just leave it there. I don't put it on the table or anything. I just don't want it near me, really.
Sometimes if I go to the park, I'll just like out wherever, I'll leave my phone at home, because I can't. Which I guess puts you in like like if there's an emergency or whatever. But like 25 years ago, people didn't have that, so it's not that different.
No, and as well, like if it's a few hours, it's like you kind of realize like how little you really need it as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's like how often are you actually getting a notification that has any relevance? Like very rarely, you know.
Like less than 1% of the time for me.
Yeah, for sure. Like, because I remember when, you know, people would just ring and say, "Do you want to meet?" And then everything you were going to say to each other, you'd say in person. You wouldn't say it. You wouldn't FaceTime it. You wouldn't fucking.
Yeah.
You know.
It's almost like invasive now to call someone.
Yeah.
I found people will be like, "Why are you call? Just text me. I'm doing stuff." I'm like, "Well, sorry, you know."
Yeah. God forbid you'd actually have a vocal conversation.
Yeah. That's why this kind of thing's so good. That's the perk of the internet, I think.
I think so, yeah. It's
one of the only positives.
Yeah, I rail against it a lot, but I do obviously use it and facilitate it as best I can, which I mean maybe is most people's defense of it. It's not actually it's not the internet that's the issue. I think it's social media that's the issue, the way social media operates as well. Because of course it has an effect outside of it. You don't just drop in, do your little thing, and then move away. It's like you take it with you. That's the thing. It's always it's in there. The very reason you keep checking your phone is because it's fucking infiltrated your mind to say like, well, you need to keep up to date. You need to see what's going on. You need to reply, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, you don't need to do anything.
I think I hear people talking about like research, like the internet is good for that, but like because I write in the morning and then in the afternoon I'm researching this kind of historical novel that I want to write.
Right.
But I'm exclusively using books, like no internet, because I feel like the stuff like in books, like you can go to the back and you can like look at the index or the sources, and then you can, you know, pick up a copy of that, and then it's all like your collection just grows and grows and grows. You get all the information you need from books. You don't need the internet. No. That's what I found.
It's also a nice way to just take a break from the internet as well, because you don't really how much can you trust what you read on the internet as well?
Exactly. Like, that's also.
Yeah. You're always having to fucking, you know, look up its merit in general. Like, you write a novel just based on Wikipedia research, you're going to have some bullshit.
That's full of shit. Wikipedia is full of shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, like you're getting that, like that's what's so great about just using books, because you will get that kind of network of different areas and different kind of thought processes and everything really, philosophy. Whereas the internet is just one giant, you know, it's just a gazillion channels. So it's sort of like finding your way around it is difficult, to say the least.
I think the only downside to researching with books, though, is the amount of space you have.
Yeah. For
me, because I've been researching this thing I'm working on for like 2 years now.
Wow.
And like I've just behind me, I've got like books stacked up on the desk.
I've noticed how many you've got in general. Like in your whole room, it's like a library.
Yeah, I got a few. I need to get another bookshelf because it's space. But it's like but there's nothing beats a book, man. It's not the same when you're getting the information off the internet. I don't think even a PDF.
I agree completely.
Look, I don't know how much time you have left, but I've got a couple more questions. If you,
that's all right. I've got a bit of time. That's fine.
Cool, awesome. Okay, so I guess maybe we've kind of already talked about this, but why do you think people have such adverse reactions to writing or reading about the kind of material that we enjoy reading? Like, what do you think it kind of unearths in them, basically, that they want to avoid it? Do you think it's just uncomfortability, or because I feel like it might be something deeper than that? I feel like it might be they see aspects of themselves in it and they don't want to.
Yeah, well, that one for sure. I think some people don't like to see the potential ugly side of themselves or to be reminded of it. I think there's a lot of teaching going on nowadays where people are kind of almost told to just kick up a fuss over fuck all.
Yeah.
So people go into things with this expectation to complain about it. It's like people who turn up at certain events just so they can moan, and that's all. People have always been around, but they seem to just be in abundance now.
Yeah, like people showing up at Jordan Peterson lectures and yelling at him for no reason.
Yeah,
Just like,
exactly.
let the fucking guy speak. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't have to agree, but to go along to his own event, for instance, or anyone's,
Yeah.
just to try and destroy it, I just think, well, what fucking good is that going to do? It creates a story. That's the problem, and it creates what I think is their vicarious way of stealing another person's, in that instance, fame or attention, or and there's just a lot of that going on. And I think if you can't, create your own kind of meaning, you'll probably try and just destroy another person's. So that whole, it's not if you can't beat them, join them. It's like if you can't beat them, destroy them. I think now is the kind of, and with the whole, the way things are, with especially this us versus them narrative that's so predominant. I think that word's tripped me up a couple of times. It seems that just seems to be everywhere now, from like the woke to the incel to the feminist to like everything's always this divisive kind of criteria, and and within that, the only way it can operate is to be outraged all the time and to pick these. I mean, it's really ridiculous now. It's like, especially with the sensationalized nature of, say, newspapers, which are dead, and everyone used to be like, oh yeah, but it's the media or whatever. They're just trying to provoke. But it's like that's translated where like that's just what the average person's trying to do in general now. It's just like the spectacle within the spectacle kind of thing. It's just like it's almost like we all know this is a facade, yet the only way we can take it seriously is by being really reactive to it. And it's just like it's weird. I don't really. I think a lot of it's to do with our loss of identity because of technology, basically. This is some realm that I'm kind of going to be going into a bit more. I think we're almost at a crisis point as a species rather than it just being individuals. So I think that's perhaps what's birthed it all.
I mean, I really don't think we're going to be here in 100 years. That's just my personal opinion. 100 years, I think we're all going to be dead. I think we're going to either blow each other up. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, COVID hasn't really done enough, sadly, as plagues go. I don't think it's been a bit, it's been a bit half-assed. But it's almost been emblematic of everything that goes on. It's like, there's a pandemic, but even that, the thing we're supposed to take seriously is the opposite that gets taken seriously. Oh, it's a scam. It's a hoax. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, that's the thing. Morons need attention, and they get attention in this current climate. So,
my dad was talking about that. I was talking to my dad about it. He's like, nobody respects. Like people are so bored that they have to like make shit up to feel special.
Yeah.
And he's like, my dad reckons that's going to be the downfall of humanity. But
I completely agree. I think that's what's happening essentially. It's like that's why you've got trigger warnings on books and fucking sensitivity readers, and people are like it's all just retardation. Like it's like
completely agree. Yeah.
And it's on a good day, I can look at it and laugh and just be like, this is so ridiculous. But then on other days, I just think it's hard not to feel the sadness of it, because it's just like, how have we got to a point where we're this bored where we have to kick up a fuss about literally every fucking thing that happens?
I know. Yeah.
So I just want new art. That's all I kind of want. I want something challenging. I don't want rehashed nostalgic bullshit, which is kind of just everywhere. Like it's that's what's hard about reading Mark Fisher, actually, because it's just the points he makes make you look at like the entertainment industry, and you're just kind of, what is there, especially in mainstream. It's just like there's just nothing. Oh well, great, there's another Marvel film out, brilliant.
Well, there's no auteurs anymore in film.
No, exactly. And then you're going to a filmmaking course, and the auteurs are fucking ignored.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell's that? It's like everything's become like a factory-made, manufactured load of puppets where they're all just making the same thing, really, and adhering. Like it's like the Netflix productions of things. They've all got that clean filter, that Netflix filter.
Yes.
And that's everything now. It's like, where's the grain? Where's the dirt? So that's what I want to see. You know, where's the?
I think probably the only director now that I think is doing good work is probably. Do you know Robert Eggers?
Yeah, actually, did
The Lighthouse?
The Lighthouse, yeah, that was great.
I think he's the only kind of real working auteur at the moment. Mostly because
if Lars von Trier carries on, I'll always watch a Lars von Trier film.
I never liked his stuff for some reason. I just couldn't get into it. No.
Oh, I'm surprised.
I think it was just something about I watched Antichrist and I was just like, I just didn't do it for me. I didn't mind Nymphomaniac. I thought that was all right.
Yeah, that's great.
That was pretty good.
They are films that I don't often revisit, but when I experience them, I do think, fucking hell, these are great. But it might be because everything in comparison to what he creates is just vanilla, you know, but he's actually going to pretty... I suppose Tarantino I would include, but even then, like, he's
retiring now.
Yeah.
Which is so sad.
Still, like, that's just Tarantino. Like, he's in his own universe kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in terms of like challenging the status quo or anything, I don't think he's doing that. He's just a film geek who just, you know, loves making movies, and that's fine. You know, I'll always watch a Tarantino film and enjoy it for the most part.
Same here.
Yeah, but yeah, I know what you mean. There isn't really anyone. I thought the guy made Dune. Like,
Denis Villeneuve.
I consider him an auteur. But yeah, they're few and far between. They're not really even looked at most of the time.
Well, with that director Robert Eggers, I think it was Universal Pictures. They just gave him like $110 million and said, "Go make whatever the fuck you want." So I'm like, yes, good, that's good.
Yeah.
And he went off and made a Viking movie, which I'm really excited for. But I think because that's what the historical thing I'm researching is set during the Viking Age, so I'm looking forward to that. So, but that's like
King out of interest.
I love that film.
Really good. Yeah, I watched it the other day on Cody's recommendation actually, because I had it like it was on Netflix and I thought it's historical drama could be good. I kind of hesitated, like thinking, but no, I thought it was great. I thought it was really well done, well acted, great script as well. It was quite like it was refreshing to hear the English language being used. That's what I enjoyed. I was like, oh yeah, people used to speak properly at one point. You know, that's nice. But or used to be eloquent with their language. You know, they used to have they used to take pride in how they express themselves, and I think that just feels like it's totally lacking now.
Well, that's what I love about people like, do you know Stephen Fry?
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Stephen Fry, but I think what I love about him is the fact that he takes the English language so seriously.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean,
and like,
kind of grew up with his multiplicity of avenues and career paths. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's actually a real inspiration to me because I think he, like the fact that he just kind of doesn't really give a shit about what people think, I think is really, like, he'll just say what he thinks, and there's not enough people that do that. And for some reason, people are just like okay with him doing that, which I think is weird. Like, he hasn't been hounded online or cancelled or anything yet.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how people react to certain things. I mean, I always find Michael Jackson to be the one where,
Oh yeah.
so he can be a paedophile and no one gives a shit. But when it's other people, like everyone's outraged and cancelling. But Michael Jackson just gets this free pass for some fucking reason. Admittedly, it might be because he was like a child himself, but.
Well, but one of my best mates, she was like, no, it's bullshit. She's like, I don't believe it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So if you were like living in an apartment building and there was some guy in room 7 that just, got out of bed, took a cheeky stroll down the hallway to a kid's room at the very end, room 3, climbed into bed, you'd be like, that guy's a fucking pedophile. There's no way. But because it's Michael Jackson, it's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, the denial.
So weird.
It's so
weird. Selective.
Yeah. It's that kind of cognitive dissonance. Like.
Yeah, for sure. What else do I think I really only have one more question, mate.
Fine with me, man.
I just wanted to know what you're reading at the moment.
Well, as I said, Capitalist Realism. I will be reading Ghost of My Life. That's another Mark Fisher. I'm waiting for that in the post. There's also a random one I'm kind of taking a punt on. I just stumbled on eBay called The Diary of an Oxygen Thief.
I've read that.
Have you? Is it good? Is it a good read? Yeah, it looks quite.
It was okay. I mean, I didn't love it, but
I think it's relatively short. But I just kind of stumbled on it. I thought, this looks intriguing. I like the title and the fact that it was like anonymous. So I thought, okay, got potential.
That's Cliff Sargent's least favorite book.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yes. Why?
He didn't elaborate, but
okay.
I think. I mean, I didn't love it, but I thought it was like. It's very, from what I can remember, because I read it when I was like 15 or something, but it's very, like, I feel like it kind of wants to be transgressive, but it's too scared to go the full way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It must it must be more famous than I realised then, because if it's been around for that long. And old Cliffy Sargent. Cliffy Boy's read it. I'm surprised he would have read it, because I assumed it was self-published from what I saw of it, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I think it was, but then a publisher picked it, like a small press or something.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they sent it to him.
Yeah, maybe. I would be intrigued to try and get him on the show, but I just don't think he'd ever take us up on it unless we paid him, and no way is that ever going to happen. So even if we had the money, I wouldn't pay him, because it'd just be like.
Look, he is a nice guy for what it's worth, but I don't know. I feel like maybe this is fair enough, but I think he prioritizes the money over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's where my criticism of him comes in. That's all, and that's based on speculation. Because obviously I suffer the same dilemma in a sense. Like the more I do it and the further I get, at some point, I presume, then I might be in a position to do the same.
Yeah.
But then I think, am I going to take that? Am I going to go with everything I've said? Imagine like I start going on about Ridge Wallet, the absolute hypocrisy. Would be like that would be hilarious to me at the same time, but
you're just like, I got one of these ones for you. Hold up a little Ridge Wallet.
Yeah, it's just the fact that if I started spewing that bollocks like every fucking video, like I don't know, it goes against everything that I think I stand for in a sense.
Same. I can't even ask people to subscribe. I feel weird about it.
Yeah, same. Like I can only ever do it really if I'm kind of taking the piss of the whole thing. Like if I'm being ironical, fine. But even then, it's just like I feel a bit of vomit in the back of my mouth. I'm just like,
That's what those guys. Do you know who Red Letter Media are?
I've heard of. But no.
Oh, mate, you gotta watch it. They're so good. They're like, they review films, but they also have like this show where they watch shitty B movies from like, people just send them random VHS tapes and they watch them. But it's really good. But they also do that thing where they're like, they'll put up like a subscribe to our Patreon or whatever, like in a kind of ironic way. But
yeah, I mean,
there's
I don't know. I think Better Than Food's doing all right with the whole Patreon thing as well.
yeah, well, he charges $20 a video or something insane.
What he charges? So to subscribe, you're paying for him to make a video what you request, or
No. It's just like, I think it's like $5, $15, $20 per video on Patreon. So you know how you do per month?
oh, really?
He does it per video.
Fucking hell. So he's literally getting paid for everything he produces instead of it being a monthly thing. Clever.
Which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't love that, but
no, I'm surprised people would sign up, because that could cost you fucking $40-50 a month if he made, if he made a lot that month.
well, he's been knocking them out recently. So
Is it? Yeah, I don't really pay attention, like, because I can't watch something where it's just constantly. It's not only the Ridge Wallet thing; he's also flogging bookmarks and coffee and shit. Like, I feel like it's like an infomercial with a 3-minute review. So I'm just like, I don't buy it. And that's with adverts on the side as well. And he even had the temerity to say, like, oh yeah, if you don't want to watch it with adverts, then sign up to the Patreon. You can watch it without. Yeah. And I was like, dude, your whole fucking video is an advert. It's like, yeah. I don't. That's what. And the reason I'm critical of that is more to, if he ever watched it or stumbled on it, it might just hopefully just be like, oh yeah, maybe I should just make some videos with it, not constantly going on about what the fucking sponsor is. But
well, I think it's fucking hilarious. Like that thumbnail where he's holding up Cody's book and it just says like "come" next to it.
yeah. I was surprised I got away with that one, actually. That's the thing with YouTube, is like, you feel like you've got away with something, but you never know.
You never know.
Like, you can't have this. This is offensive. Yeah. I'm sure. I wonder whether he must have seen us railing on him. There's another one.
Somebody must have tweeted him.
I would have thought so. Yeah, but I think the bigger you get on YouTube, obviously, the more you're going to get contacted, either via email or you get tagged or whatever. And I think you must just be like, you just ignore it for the majority.
Yeah.
Especially if someone's just taking the piss out of you. like we are, basically.
Well, but the thing is, like, if he has a sense of humor, you got to laugh about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can't take yourself too seriously, can you? So that's
no.
I look at it. And if you're at that stage where people are roasting you and stuff, that kind of means that you're doing pretty well, because it means that, all of us have heard of him, whereas I can't say the same for myself. So it's
well, I hope you reach his level of success, because I think
I mean, it's really tricky nowadays. I think I just don't think my personality suits what YouTube is all about. I think I'm too anti it, and as you said, as soon as someone hears something that I say that they don't like, then I'm getting unsubs and fucking
That's so weird, this inability to, like, because you've said things that I disagree with, but it's like, so what? Who cares? Exactly, like I remember one of my best mates was a Trump's, like, he really thought Trump was like really good, and I was like, well, okay, that's bullshit, but we can move on. And I'm like, I was friends with him for years after that, and it's like, who cares?
Yeah. I know.
Like you and Cody disagree with James about a lot of things, and it's really interesting.
Usually capitalism, I've noticed.
Yes. Yeah.
Or maybe veganism sometimes, but I don't really disagree with veganism. I just like roasting them.
Yeah. Well, that's always fun.
Well, yeah, vegans are kind of just disagreeable fuckers for the most part. So I just find it's funny to.
Yeah, they're so full on. They're like,
Yeah, it's too much. Too much. They're obsessed with it as well. They just it's all they fucking talk about. From my experience in Brighton, anyway, they're just like, oh yeah, they do really good vegan cupcakes at that place, and it's like everything like is just based around. Again, it comes down to this identity. It's like, you know, you always want to be seen as these certain things, which again I think is the problem with everything online, because people only ever want to identify with what they're subscribed to. So if I said something that you disagree with, then it's like, oh my god, you know, it's immediate unsubs because they don't want to be associated. Which is why I think it's difficult for transgressive writers to get anywhere when they're not. If they're not Chuck Palahniuk, who he's already on the pedestal of fame,
yeah,
which lets them get away with what they do. Because Stephen King's written some really fucked up stories. No one ever says,
yeah,
he might be a bit this way or that. It's just no, he's a fucking fiction author. Like, you know.
yeah.
That's
well, I think that's
the fame allows you into the fun house, and it allows you into the freedom of, I don't know, just the chaos, because people respect you automatically because you've made it. You know, you're a name kind of thing. It's perverse, really, but.
Well, that's what I'm super worried about with my book, because I don't mean to keep going on about it, but when I especially the sections that I'm up to now, I'm writing it and I'm thinking, fuck, like people I know are going to read this and they're going to be like, are you all right, man? Like it's going to be like because there's some pretty, there's some really awful shit that happens in what I'm writing, all based on, well, not all, but a lot of it's based on truth, but it's also like,
sounds good.
I don't want people to come up to me and be like, you're fucked, and I don't want to like ruin relationships. I don't know, but then again, like, who gives a shit?
Do you have a lot of people in your inner circle that you think would actually read it? Because that's what I find. It's like you think you worry about all this stuff, but then you realize that even if people do read it, they don't say anything to you about, unless they really know you well, maybe. But for me, they just won't even read it. So there's a weird freedom I get with that, because it's like I don't have, you know, it doesn't matter.
Well, I have a certain, like, I've told my parents, I'm like, don't read it. They're like, all right, but like my mates, I think they'll read it if I've written it. Like, they're not big readers, but they'll read it if I've written it. And I think, and like one friend specifically, I'm kind of worried about her reading it, but I'm just like, I just feel like if you're gonna, like, if you want to be I think I heard like Cody talking about this at some stage on the podcast, but if you're really gonna do it, you have to just do it. You can't be like, so maybe I just have to deal with the consequences of it. But yeah, I don't know. Also don't know how I'm going to release it. I don't know if I want to probably self-publish.
I think it's I think it's the best avenue to go down, especially if it does have controversial subject matters and whatnot. I was going to say that, you'll be surprised at how inconsequential it probably will be to your personal life, but
I hope so.
Then remember, like, I have pissed off quite a few people with my stuff, and they, you know, I mean, one of them was completely uncalled for, though, because it was just like an aside where I think I quoted something that he said or something. He got proper, but we're not even close friends anyway. He just made a mountain out of a molehill kind of thing. But that's was annoying. Very typical of him, in fairness. Right. And there has been incidences where I've pissed off a few people with what I've written. But usually I think it's taken completely out of context and used more as an excuse to be, you know, it's a bit like what we've been alluding to this whole kind of podcast with how people react to things nowadays. It's like they actually just use it for their own devices. It's got nothing to do with the content. It's more for them to go, I'm offended, and then rail on about it. So, but yeah, obviously I don't know how personal it is to you and how it relates to people you know and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, would you be interested in giving it a read if I sent it to you at some point?
Yeah. For sure. As close to releasing it as possible, I'd prefer, if that's...
For sure, yeah.
That's all I request, really. But...
That's all right, yeah. I think because mostly I'm worried about like people thinking that I base characters on them. That's mostly what I'm worried about, but
yeah, I feel like because I'm so reclusive that just doesn't bother me because I've based I've based characters on people. I'm sure if they read it they'd know it was them, but because we had friction anyway, I'm just like, well, all right, admit that that's you. It doesn't make you look very good, So, but yeah, for me it's always like, even if you do base it on them, it's only your interpretation of them at that time and in that period. And usually it's just because you're writing from what you know, but it doesn't mean that you're saying that that's who they are. And a lot of the time, it's just, there's part of you in that person, in every character you have.
For sure, yeah.
So, and people are just funny about this kind of stuff. I don't know. Overly funny about it. Like I got a writer friend and he's so overprotective of his work, like to the point of like, I don't even know why you're bothering with, he won't even send it like on email because he's worried, or he claims that he's worried people like someone's going to find it and fucking nick it and all that. And I'm like, dude, like no one gives a shit about it, man. It's like, nothing, like, and it's like, it's this weird kind of arrogance mingled with insecurity, which I don't really understand. I'm just like,
it's like paranoia.
Too much, way too much in my mind. But who knows, maybe he'll send his stuff to some big publisher one day and then all of a sudden he's like the big bollocks of literature. Who knows? But I doubt it because I don't think he'd ever show it to people overall.
Yeah, I do have that instinct occasionally, like worrying maybe, well, because I think everything I write's shit. I don't know if you experience that.
But I have moments where I'm just like, I'm deluded, everything I write sucks. What's the point? I think that's just part of being a writer in a sense. I think maybe it's true in some ways when you look back on what you write in your earlier years or in certain periods. You're like, oh no, I'd like to change this, that, and the other. But I think part of the process is letting it go and letting yourself be exposed and be seen as like the fool in a way. You have to kind of get over all of that to thicken your skin because it's a hard business kind of thing.
Yeah, I looked at a novel that I wrote when I was 16 and I was like flicking through it and I was like, this is just, I've never read such bullshit in my life. I was just going through it. But like, I guess that's a good thing, right? Because you know where you can improve.
Yeah, for sure. For every like, writing kind of tip video or whatever, it's just fucking write. That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
You don't need to like, all you're really doing is avoiding it by watching those videos or reading books about writing or whatever. It's just put your head down and just get on with it.
I'm also adamant about not outlining.
I'm a mix really. Like I outline, but I often re-outline, and then like it's in that kind of balance of the story, if you know what I mean.
Right, okay.
They kind of, it's almost like they rally with each other. So I never stick to the outline, but I do have one originally, and then I let the story do what it does, and then adapt the outline to that. But I sometimes feel like I'm just making more work for myself.
Yeah. I mean, because every time I've tried writing an outline, I'm like, well, like I've had an idea that completely destroys everything that I've.
Yeah.
And then I'll pursue that instead. And yeah, so I just I always have an ending in mind, but I can't. Yeah, I can't.
I'd recommend having an ending in mind for sure.
Yeah.
Because I've gone into stuff and thought, I don't actually know how I want to end it. And no, I found those to be the most difficult pieces to finish, because it's like you just don't. You're constantly waiting for that epiphany of like, oh, that's how it needs to end. Whereas if you start from the ending, I think that's much easier to try and build up to.
Mm.
You have a decision in mind of like how, I don't know, your protagonist's story will end, how they're, will they progress? Will they fall? Will they,
Yeah.
whatever. Well, sometimes it's just a scene, like you just think, oh, that would be a savage ending. And then you just work your way somehow to doing that. But
Do you write out of order, or do you write in order, like chronologically?
Mostly, yeah, linearly. Mostly.
Right.
I don't always. I have written short stories where I write the ending first and then try and figure out how I'd begin it. I often rewrite the beginning. I think that's something that seems to happen a lot. With Heather, it didn't, but it was only I know I did rewrite it, yeah, because the original, it kind of went straight into an action kind of chapter, whereas, yeah, when I went back, it was just really kind of short pieces, him kind of giving you these disclaimers, which was actually a slight piss take of like trigger warnings. Like, I was just kind of making sure, like, you know what you're getting into.
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's from the perspective of a loon, basically, or a kind of psychotic, where he's just saying like, don't say I didn't fucking warn you, kind of thing.
Yeah. I also love that chapter where you were talking about the ravens. Like just out of nowhere, there's just this chapter where he's like,
I
describes the. I love that chapter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that foreshadowing of the animalistic kind of element of the story, and there's so much symbolism to be found with ravens as well, and crows, and just especially black animals in general. They've always got that kind of mythological
black cats.
Yeah, like they're always surrounded by death, and like and reading up on that stuff actually just is interesting as well, like, and how you can implement that into your story. There's a part where he mentions something about them being omnivorous, and that was actually a slight nod to what he's going to do later on, kind of thing, of like becoming a cannibal kind of thing, or cannibalistic at least. And yeah, there's all that kind of entwining kind of thing. That's kind of where I try and explore most of my stories. That's where the themes kind of lie for me.
Right.
I'm trying to interweave it all, but it's like, I suppose in the way we experience consciousness in some ways, where it's like you realize how fucking unreliable it really is, how dreamlike quite a lot of it is as well, and all of these things.
Well, another Russ Cole quote: "You live your entire life inside a locked room."
Yeah,
that's what it is.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Was that Ligotti or was that him? Was that plagiarized? Yeah.
I don't know whether it was actually. If you haven't read Conspiracy Against the Human Race,
I haven't, but it's on my shelf.
Yeah, you definitely should. I think the reason you're probably mentioning Russ Cole is I can't remember if it came out before I wrote Food Bar. I'm pretty sure it did, because I always remember this weird billboard poster of it, where I was working in a place it was near the house I was living at and the place I was working, and that memory of that time always tells me like, no, you hadn't even started Fubar yet.
Yeah, it came out in 2014, I think.
Yeah, and I think I only released Fubar a couple of years ago, and I think I must have started it 2-3 years after that. But
It was definitely my first. True Detective was my first kind of descent into nihilism. I was like, fuck, he's right. Everything he's saying. And then I was like, I kind of looked into Ligotti a bit more. I've read some of his short stories. Yeah. Is James still looking for that True Detective Blu-ray that he keeps going on about? Or has he found it?
I don't know. I don't know. No, he hasn't mentioned it. But I did realise that we were talking about True Detective 2 more often than any of the other series. Or the first. I was like, why the fuck are we talking about 2? 2 sucks, you know. Yeah.
So I was going to say I've got 2 Blu-ray copies, so I could send him one.
No, I mean I could let him know if you want.
Yeah.
If he's interested. How come
it's a nice. Oh, because I got one when it came out, and then there was like there's like a special edition like slipcase steelbook thing with really nice art on it. So I got that as well because I had some like might have had an extended episode, but I don't know.
Okay.
So I got that ages and ages ago, but I was going to say I'm not using it, so he can have it if he wants.
Yeah, I can let him know. Well, you're going to be on the show soon.
Oh yeah, I am. Yeah, so, I'm really looking forward to that. I think that.
Yeah, same. Good. It's going to be good, man. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Look forward to it.
Well, I hope this wasn't too painful for you.
No, not at all. Might be for the viewer. I tend to like be everything I create. I just feel like I should try and cut it down.
No, I love it, man. I love it when you go off on tangents because it's always interesting.
Cool. Well, hopefully, yeah. I think it's been fun, man. I think it's been interesting as well. So I think
awesome. Thanks, man.
Viewers enjoy it, and it's been great chatting with you. We should do it again,
same
and
here.
we will. We will be doing it this week on the show. So
that's good. So yeah, it's going to be great, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I really appreciate you coming on, because seeing as I don't have that many subscribers, I think not a lot of people do that, so I really appreciate it.
No, anytime, man, anytime. Just let me know. It's been a pleasure. Anytime even if it's just for a chat, fine with me. Yeah, that'd be
awesome.
Great.
Yes, same here.
All right, great.
Okay. All right, hang on. How do I just stop the recording?
Yeah, I think so.